On the illegal immigrants that will be taken out of the country, as you know, we're going to be taking them out, and if they come back, we have laws that will be immediately enacted where they serve 10 years in prison. And as you know, we're asking for the death penalty for any migrant who comes into our country and kills an American citizen or a police or law enforcement person.
Politicians have got to stop treating immigration as an issue to scare up votes in an election. And when I am president, we will quickly remove those who arrive here unlawfully, prosecute the cartels, and give Border Patrol the support they so desperately need. We are a nation of immigrants. And I will work with Congress to pass immigration reform, including an earned path to citizenship for hardworking immigrants like farm workers and our dreamers.
That was Vice President Harris and former President Trump giving their closing arguments to voters yesterday. Polls consistently show immigration is one of the most important issues to voters in this election. So today, with 6 days left until the final votes are cast, we are taking a deep dive with full team coverage into where Trump and Harris stand on the issue and how their policy proposals could impact the United States. Now, former President Trump has made immigration a central focus of his campaign. He and Republicans say migrants illegally crossing into the U.S. are causing a rise in violent crime, taking American jobs, and hurting the economy. Some Republican governors have even transported migrants to sanctuary cities led by Democrats, saying small towns and border states are being overwhelmed, while critics say the move uses human beings as political pawns. ABC's Maria Villarreal covers immigration for us, and she joins me now for more on the reality at the southern border. Maria, thanks for doing this. What does the data show about how many people are crossing into the United States illegally and how that number has progressed over the past 4 years?
Well, Diane, you know, if you had asked me that question a year ago, I would say things are coming on the horizon that are very concerning. And sure enough, you know, we take a look at where things were in September of 2023 and into really December and January. Things were chaotic, according to what we were hearing by Border Patrol agents, but also what we were seeing on the ground. I mean, we saw some record numbers at the border. Clearly, agents and people that were responding to these issues were overwhelmed. However, in February and March, after that border security bill was torpedoed, you know, that would have given a whole lot of funding, right, to a lot of the agencies and local law enforcement along the border. After that didn't work out, obviously this administration knew they needed to do something. And so we saw executive order being passed in, you know, the June timeframe. And within a month to 2 months, we've seen a considerable turnaround. In fact, in the fiscal year of 2024, we saw 1.5 million encounters between ports of entry. That is the lowest number of apprehensions that we have seen since 2020. That's right around the COVID pandemic era. Also, if you compare September of this year to September of last year, again, a considerable difference. We are seeing roughly over 50,000 encounters and apprehensions, and that is a 75% decrease from last year. So clearly, things have changed and turned around, but it was only after that executive order.
So who are these hundreds of thousands of people coming to the U.S.? What's driving them here?
You know, listen, we've talked a lot about the fact that Latin American countries make up a good bulk of the people that are coming here. And a lot of the reason why is because what's happening in their own countries, right? Economic instability, violent crime, government corruption. I mean, we're talking about places like, you know, Guatemala, Venezuela, Honduras, even places like Haiti, where they have just had a number of issues surrounding what it's like to live there. So they find opportunity here. But I will say, speaking with Border Patrol agents over the last 6 to 8 months, and also Homeland Security investigators, they've also told us that they have seen a change in the demographic of the people that are coming here. And while, yes, Latin American countries still make up a big chunk of the people that we are seeing coming into our country, we are also seeing places a rise up in the numbers like India and China, and even a resurgence of the number of people that we are seeing from Mexico as well.
Maria, we've heard former President Trump say that other countries are emptying their jails in America, essentially, that they are sending their criminals our way. What are you seeing in terms of that, and how big of a problem is violent crime committed by migrants?
You know, Dan, I would love to see the Harris campaign really dig into this particular issue, because while we, want to make sure that we deal in facts here and the conversations that we're having surrounding the presidential election and what each candidate is saying, also we'd like to see that from the Harris campaign. And the reason why I bring that up is because sometimes they are privy to more information than we are, right? But as we continue to dig into this one statement that the former president continues to bring up at his rallies and press conferences, we have yet to be able to find any sort of substantial data or information that would support where he is getting that information, that they are coming from prisons, mental institutions, that they are sending over all their criminals from jails. I think what this is this is a way for him to feed into the narrative and the anti-immigrant rhetoric, and really put a lot of push on people's fear, of the unknown. Because we don't know, because most people don't understand and know a lot about immigration and how it works and the people that are coming here, by saying that they are coming from mental institutions and prisons, you're playing on the fears of Americans and what our country might turn into if we don't get a handle on this particular issue. But honestly, Diane, I'm not really exactly sure where the former president continues to get that information.
So what's the economic impact of illegal immigration?
That's kind of a loaded question, right? The economic impact of illegal immigration is hard to quantify, because that would mean that you'd have to get a lot of migrants who have come here, who have crossed the border in an illegal way. You'd have to get them to talk to you, and that is darn near impossible. However, I will say undocumented immigrants, the American Immigration Council did a lot of research on this particular issue, trying to quantify how much they contribute to our society. It is very clear that undocumented immigrants come here and they want to work. So much so, I'm just going to read some statistics to make sure I get this right. So much so that we are seeing roughly, in 2022, 11 million undocumented immigrants, and we were able to see that they paid $46.8 billion in federal taxes, $29.3 billion in state and local taxes, and they also contributed $22.6 billion in Social Security. The conversation of what are we going to do if there is mass deportation, if we could even logistically make that happen, which I'm not sure we can, but if we say that could happen, we're going to see a number of industries be impacted. We're not even just talking about how much they contribute in taxes. We're looking at major industries like agriculture and construction taking huge hits if we even attempt to make that happen.
All right, ABC's Maria Rial, thank you. And Vice President Harris and former President Trump are proposing very different plans to deal with immigration. Harris is pushing Congress to pass a bipartisan bill to fund more border agents and immigration judges, while Trump is calling for mass deportations of every undocumented immigrant living in the U.S. Senior reporter Catherine Falders joins me now for more. Catherine, Trump has left build the wall behind. Now his crowds chant, they gotta go. So how does he plan to deport 11 million people? And what else is he proposing here?
Well, that's exactly the question here. We have been talking a lot about, Donald Trump has on the campaign trail, mass deportations. He's said away from the build the wall, which we've heard for years and years, to get them out. Now, how exactly can he do that? That's the big question. He hasn't answered that. His campaign hasn't answered that. And it's not... It shouldn't be at least as easy as we think, right? Like there will be a lot of political challenges, of course, obstacles that he has to overcome, a lot of legal challenges that he also has to overcome here associated with this. So what he's proposing has never really been done in U.S. history. We're talking about people who have been here for years, for decades, people who have families. He's floated sending the National Guard to houses, if you will, to get immigrants out of the country. So while he says this, while he proposes that he's going to do this, his whole point with the rhetoric is to essentially say, oh, look, under the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, all of these people have come in. The facts around that are a little iffy. So that's why he's changed at least the political rhetoric around it. But can he actually do it? I'm not sure that he can do it the way that he's saying that he will, at least.
Now, Harris says Trump killed that bipartisan bill in the Senate to help his election chances. So, recap here. What's in the bill? How much support is there for this in Congress? And why would Trump not want it passed?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So this bill was about a little bit over $20 billion in this legislation for the southern border. And that was to beef up security, hire additional Border Patrol agents, increase immigration restrictions and enforcement. And it gave the president power, essentially, the authority to declare an emergency and temporarily shut down the border when a certain threshold of illegal crossings had been reached. Now, Harris says, yes, that Trump killed the bill. He did kill the bill. Now, the question is, and you hear Harris talk about this a lot in terms of her immigration policy, well, Trump killed this bill. This was bipartisan legislation. We had this on the table. It was endorsed by Leader McConnell at the time. He killed that. Now, the question is, now should Democrats regain control of Congress, will this be back on the table? Will they try and revive this legislation? Some Democrats, of course, say they will because Harris has been talking about it. But again, this is a hefty package, over $20 billion for the border. That's essentially what Harris is saying, her immigration policy, that Trump killed it. Will this come back? We'll see in a few months.
Meanwhile, Republicans say that even without Congress, the Biden administration could have acted much sooner to kind of quell this influx of migrants coming into the country via executive order. But instead, that the administration only acted when it was hurting them politically. So how much did Biden's June executive order impact those numbers? We just heard a little bit about that from Maria. And could more have been done sooner?
I think, yes, more could have been done sooner if the administration analyzed it better and acted on it sooner. Look, I think a lot of this was when the Biden administration came in, and from talking to sources close to Biden, they just wanted to attempt to reverse everything that the former president had done. Of course, that's what Biden had been saying on the trail. So could they have done it sooner? Potentially. How would that have impacted the numbers? It's hard to know. I know Maria laid that out. But again, it is definitely something, at least inside the Biden administration, that they acknowledge privately that they could have potentially done better.
All right. Senior reporter Catherine Falders. Catherine, thank you. And former President Trump is doubling down on his pledge to launch the largest deportation program in American history on day one if he's reelected. He made that promise again at his packed Madison Square Garden rally. Pew Research says more than 11 million undocumented immigrants live in the U.S. Nearly 80% have lived in the country for a decade or longer. Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Colorado, Denver, Andrea Velasquez, joins me now for more on this. Andrea, the U.S. issued mass deportations in the 1950s and during the Great Depression that targeted Mexicans. But mass deportations on the scale that Trump is proposing would be unprecedented. So what would Trump's plan look like if enacted?
Yeah, so it is important to first, I want to say thank you for inviting me. And to understand the economic effects of this mass deportation program, it is important, again, to highlight a number that you mentioned before, and that is that it is estimated that 11 million undocumented immigrants are living in the U.S. right now, but that accounts for 3.3% of the population, 5% of the workforce. So when we're talking about this mass deportation that Trump is talking about, we're talking about removing 5% of the workforce, and that can have important economic effects. And those effects we have studied before, and in my own research, we find important negative effects for actually U.S.-born workers. And what is important here to understand is that one of the rhetorics behind these large-scale deportation programs is actually to improve the labor opportunities of U.S.-born workers. But again, with our own research, what we find is actually the opposite effect. And what we have estimated actually is that for every 500,000 of immigrants that are removed from the labor market, 44,000 fewer U.S.-born people are employed. And this is very counterintuitive, right? So what explains these results? And the first thing that explains these results is that actually immigrants and U.S.-born workers are not competing for the same jobs. And usually, the immigrants are working in roles that complement those of U.S.-born workers. So when undocumented immigrants are deported, that doesn't mean that U.S.-born workers are automatically going to fill those positions. So now we are going to have sectors, as was mentioned before, we're going to have some sectors with significant labor shortages, which is going to increase labor costs, and that is going to have a ripple effect that is going to affect the demand for U.S.-born workers. And also when we think about the economic effects, when we remove immigrants from the economy, we're also removing consumers, which is going to lead to lower spending in local businesses. And again, this is going to further decrease job opportunities for U.S.-born workers. So we are going to have sectors just like construction, hospitality, retail, caregiving, that have an important amount of unauthorized workers, and that is going to affect, again, the demand of U.S.-born workers.
Now, Andrea, former President Trump has pointed to cases where immigrants were released from ICE custody and then went on to commit violent crimes or were allowed into the country despite having a criminal history. If mass deportation isn't the answer, what is?
Yeah, so that is key too, because when we, again, I just want to reinforce what is the rhetoric behind these large-scale deportation programs. And one is create labor opportunities for U.S.-born workers. We find that that is not the effect. And another rhetoric is decreasing crime. But there is also evidence with this. The effect of secure communities that was implemented in 2008. When we look at the effects of secure communities, we actually find that there is no effect on crime. The deportation of unauthorized immigrants has been shown that it doesn't have an effect on crime. And actually, there is an effect on crime in any way, is that there is a lower report of crimes by Hispanics, which increases actually the victimization of Hispanic immigrants. So I think we need to start to move towards these large-scale deportations are not achieving what they were designed to in theory. They're not creating more job opportunities, and they're not diminishing crime.
All right, Andrea Velasquez, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's bring in Trump campaign representative, director of Hispanic engagement at the American Principle Project, Alfonso Aguilar, and Democratic strategist, former Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, for more. Thank you both for coming on. Alfonso, why should Trump follow through with a mass deportation proposal despite what we just heard about the potential costs and consequences?
Well, respectfully, there are many inaccuracies in some of the reporting and some of that professor has stated. She's using studies that I think are biased. What we have definitely seen an increase in crime committed by illegal immigrants that have arrived in the past 3 years. Look, we have the Tren de Aragua, a criminal organization operating in different points of the country. That's undisputable. We didn't have that criminal organization operating in the U.S. It has terrorized countries throughout Latin America. They're here. You know, we want to be a welcoming country for legal immigrants. Our system is not ready to receive so many migrants, millions of migrants in a short period of time. It causes all sorts of problems, from cultural clash to limited resources from cities taken away from citizens to go to welcome these individuals. Look, you have Democratic mayors in Chicago and New York complaining about it. So it does have an economic impact. It does have an impact in crime. The Manhattan Institute recently did a study that showed that massive migration of unskilled migrants, the cost is much higher than what those unskilled immigrants put into the community. So we want to have a legal process. There are legal ways to bring agricultural workers, the H-2A program, and other unskilled workers, the H-2B program. Even during the Trump years, even though he's been much maligned, you know, the legal numbers were very high. Every year we were providing 1 million individuals the status of permanent residents. So, you know, massive deportation can work. And I should clarify, President Trump and Senator Vance have clarified that the initial focus is criminal elements, and that can be done.
Mayor, Vice President Harris was tasked with solving the root causes of immigration. So why then are we still seeing hundreds of thousands of migrants coming from Central America?
Well, I don't believe that was her actual task. She was asked to look at some of the causes, but I don't think she was tasked ever with solving it. And when the Biden administration looked at solving it in a bipartisan way, because former President Trump wanted to have a fear-based, xenophobia-based, racist-based campaign, he tanked a bipartisan bill that could have helped. So, you know, when I think about this conversation that we're having about immigration, I have to look at what is under that conversation, and it is a very sad attempt by the former president to otherize members of our community, to demonize the people who many communities across the country depend on as a part of the workforce. And why? Because he has a failing campaign, because he really does not have policies, and he doesn't really plan on following through. We remember his campaign where he was talking about build the wall and Mexico will pay for it. What happened? None of those. So this is just another attempt to try to stoke fear to get his supporters out.
All right, Alfonso Aguilar, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, thank you both.